Hi, this is Julie Wilson for 49th Shelf. Boom! Manufacturing Memoir for the Popular Market is the latest book by Julie Rak, published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. Rak is a professor in the Department of English and Film Studies at the University of Alberta. When Rak realized that the massive genre of memoir was not being discussed in the academic realm, she decided to take it on, focusing on 1 year of publication, 2003.
But what I didn't realize, of course, because it hadn't happened yet, was that 2003 was the year of the invasion of Iraq by the United States. It affected the books that were published all around that year. The year James Frey published A Million Little Pieces, and that created a huge blow-up in 2005, 2 years after it appeared, because of the Oprah Winfrey show and the discovery that James Frey had exaggerated his material, and that created a scandal. For a very brief moment, it was possible to see very clearly that the author is not someone who speaks the book into being and then the reader gets it directly, that there is an industry that creates a reception of these things. She thought that publishers are like moral arbiters, and they're there in order to create a trusting environment for her as a reader.
10 years earlier, another memoir was taking the readers and industry by storm. It was Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen.
It was one of the top-selling non-fictional books of any kind in the year it appeared. One reason was that no one was writing about mental illness. And it was also that this was a woman doing it. These things were all new. And so that book really was a watershed. The other thing that's important is that back in the 90s, one of the most important ways that non-fictional authors reached their audiences was through the medium of television. You can really think about the 1990s as the time when the talk show format was dominant. If you're a fictional writer, what are you talking about when you're in an interview? You're talking about the book you wrote, and maybe somebody will ask you about the characters. But if you're a nonfiction writer writing memoir, you can talk about yourself and your situation and the issues that the book raises. That's really why Susanna Kaysen became such a phenomenon. She had crossover appeal, went to another medium, and it caused people to turn to her book.
On to navel-gazing, something that gets leveled against memoir writers all the time. Are such stories a narcissistic pursuit at heart? Is it, quote-unquote, real writing?
Especially in the popular press or in a mainstream press environment, a lot of people will say, these people are just up themselves, and it's not really writing that's good, and it's not really literature. And then some people go so far as to say that it's a threat to fiction. But if you think about it, why would it be that narcissism would be interesting to other people? What you're really saying, if you're making that criticism, is that the audience for this is stupid. And actually, the novel was created partly an imitation of what the memoir could do. And so some of the decisions that someone makes are the same. For instance, what are you going to put in and what are you going to leave out is something that every writer has to contend with. And how are you going to tell a story and remain faithful to the content is also another problem, right? Or the problem of voice. What kinds of voice are you going to use?
I wanted to push this a little further with Rak, this question of why someone would publish about their life, especially the more traumatic details. At 49th Shelf, we recently talked to Jevita Bydlowska, whose memoir, Drunk Mom, will continue for some time to be held up as an example of a book that begs just this question.
Freud said narcissism in adults is okay, when it is in the bounds of the normal. What he means is that if you didn't have any sense of self, you would probably want to die. And a lot of memoirs are actually about that loss of self and how somebody gets it back. Right? Drunk Mom is a really good example of it, actually, where the person just is almost dissolved within this addiction and is doing things that they know are damaging, right? In that sense, we're a lot more interested as readers, I think, in that loss of self and how someone can come back to who they are than in some kind of compulsive self-retelling. But narcissism is not a good answer because there's an awful lot of narcissistic novelists out there who write about themselves all the time, too. The differences are, they're not that great.
Creative nonfiction is a term that we seem to be hearing more and more of each day. But when you go into a bookstore, you don't routinely find a section for creative nonfiction. So where does Rak think this term has come from?
It's a new term that has come about because of the memoir boom, because it has been popularized by writers who want to be doing what they would think of as literary writing, right? So it's a way of differentiating themselves from the more market-based celebrity tell-alls and other kinds of work like that. I think another important thing to remember about memoir is that it used to mean that you wrote about your life, yes, but you wrote about it in relation to something else. You wrote about it in relation to a big event, like let's say you survived a war or a battle. So it's the eyewitness quality of memoir that was important for many years. It's only recently that memoir has begun to act like autobiography, where it's supposed to be just one person's story. That's a really new development.
This seems to be a perfect segue into books about parenting, motherhood in particular. Books that seem to fall into a category of confessional/domestic writing that reviewers really aren't sure what to do with.
How do you avoid the sentimental? Because that has been the dominant way that stories about motherhood have been told in this society since the 19th century. And that discourse is relentless. But not everyone's mother is fantastic, and not every experience of mothering is perfect. These kinds of narratives are really threatening to people who want to keep that fiction going. And motherhood in particular still seems like something that's really hard to write about in that way, where you can translate the difficulty, the beauty of the experience in a way that you can transmit it so that other people can understand and see it. It's as compelling as anything else I've ever read. Making the experience live, that's the challenge memoirs have.
That's Julie Rak, author of Boom, Manufacturing Memoir for the Popular Market, published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. And for a short list of Rak's recommended Canadian memoirs, visit 49thshelf.com and check out this and all our author interviews. Thanks for listening. I'm Julie Wilson for 49th Shelf.